on this event. It's really awesome. And thanks so much, Wayne, for agreeing to do this.
Thank you for having me, Cory. Excited to do this.
Awesome. Well, I remember doing this in person in Richmond, California, a couple years ago now, and I'm excited for when we can all do that again. But you know, that was sort of if the title of this discussion is the rise and fall and resurgence, I feel like that event was sort of around the rise. And Wayne, you joined Lime, I think in 2018 as an executive, sort of around that time as well. You became CEO last spring as sort of the fall was in full swing. You had pandemic, you had questions about financial viability, and now I think all these companies are hoping to sort of create a resurgence in 2021. I was hoping just to kick us off, you could tell us a little bit about your vision for this company and what you told Lime investors, you know, what you told Lime's largest shareholder, Uber, where you used to work when you were coming in. What was your vision for Lime at the depths of the fall? How did you set the stage for you to take over?
Yeah, great question, Cory. You know, I think the vision for Lime has always been so much more than scooters. I know sometimes people say, oh, Lime is the biggest scooter company or e-bike company. I think we really see ourselves as a transportation platform for all trips under 5 miles. And we see that the mission of the company is to displace the existing transportation ecosystem, which is so broken, and it's dominated by cars, and it's expensive, it's inequitable. And 30% of the world's greenhouse gas comes from transportation, largely driven by cars and trucks. And so the vision that we have is there has to be something better. And by building a platform of green, affordable, safe modes of transportation, and today, Luke referenced this, but we announced our third mode, which is an electric moped. We are the largest scooter company. We have the world's greatest e-bike, and now we have e-moped. And over time, we're building out a platform where anybody who wants to go from point A to point B within the city can say, I'm going to use Lime instead of a car. And over time, the use of cars, the congestion in cities will decline. That's our vision. And that's the world that we hope to get towards. And this week, the announcement this week is a major step towards realizing that vision.
For sure. And I definitely want to dig in a little bit into specifically about how you'll make mopeds work. I think at least in the US, a lot of us have watched Revel's growth, at least in New York, and found that really interesting. Obviously, this is a global story as well, and much of the rest of the world has sort of is more accustomed to mopeds being a form of regular transportation. In terms of, I do want to sort of make sure I understand sort of the state of the business right now. Coming hopefully out of COVID, as you guys go into spring and into growth mode, what are you investing in most? Is it kick scooters? Is it jump e-bikes? Is it mopeds? Where are most of your dollars going to be going in terms of investing in vehicle types?
Yeah, Cory, you know, we don't think about it perhaps as like modes. I think that the way I would think about our business is, how do I actually realize that vision? I would love a world where you can walk out into a city and open the Lime app and do everything you want to do, go anywhere, and at the price point that you want. And frankly, today that isn't truly realized in any of our cities, because there's caps, because we don't have all the modes realized, because there's certain regulations in place. And so when I think about how do we invest, it's about how do we invest into various modes to build out a platform where you can make that choice. You can say no to a car. You can make a green alternative option to transportation. And so we're going to look at city by city. How do we build a reliable platform of green, safe, affordable alternatives? And different cities are going to have different needs. They're going to have different regulations. They're going to have different existing infrastructure. And the final thing is, I always see ourselves as a complement to public transit. And so the type of investment we will make to a city would often depend on the type of public transportation they have. Public transportation is the heart of any good public transportation system, but they do long distance well, but they rarely do short distance well. And this is where Lime comes in and fills that void. We're so good. We are excellent at under 5 miles. And so we're looking at the city, we're looking at their public transit system, we're looking at our existing fleets, and we're going to invest differently into those cities to build that vision of a one app that could take all your transportation under 5 miles.
So to me, like the Lime has been through some ups and downs, I think, in regards to that vision that you're speaking to. So 2017, 2018, maybe even early 2019, were a little bit more of the go-go days of micromobility startups. Money was a little bit easier to raise. People were really interested in sort of the growth trajectories of these companies. Lime was talking about building Lime. You tested out like a car sharing, platform. You obviously have, bikes and e-bikes that you manufactured that weren't Jump. Then you absorbed Jump. Anyway, there was a time where you guys sort of said, we're going to focus on scooters because we need to figure out how to actually make that work as a viable business. We're losing a ton of money and need to get dialed in on that. Why expand to all these new modes? I would imagine the scooter stuff isn't totally solved yet.
Yeah, well, I think what you said is exactly right, but I don't know if those two things are necessarily competing. You got to be, I think we want to build a great business at Lime, and I think any great businesses in the long run is doing whatever they're doing, whether they sell sandwiches or if they sell you TVs. A great business has to ultimately be able to be self-sustaining. They got to be able to make profits doing what they do. And so a big part of the focus of what we've done over the last year is to do exactly that. Take another look at our business. How do we revamp our operations? How do we ensure our scooters last longer? How do we make sure that riders choose Lime because we are providing a differentiated product that they say really meets their needs? And when we did that over the last year, we actually delivered differentiated results. I know one thing we had talked about, Cory, is that Q3, we generated profits and cash flow for the first time on a full quarterly basis. That allows us and earns us the right to go the next step on realizing that broader vision. Because scooters is not enough. I love scooters. I use scooters. I used to go to work every day to scooters, come back home, go to as many of my day on scooters. But there are moments when a scooter isn't great. If I have coming back from a grocery store, I can't quite carry the groceries. I want to go longer distances, it becomes harder. And so the profitability is only the means to which to realize that next step, which is building that green alternative transportation system. So yes, we got to do that first step, which is build a sustainable business. But the second we do, we're constantly thinking about how do we take that second, third step, the fourth and fifth mode that we're working on over the next year to truly realize a vision of a transportation alternative. So I think those two things go hand in hand. And the second we figure something out, we're going to take that next step to continue to realize that broader goal.
Yeah, when you announced, I think last year that your third quarter was your first profitable one, that raised a lot of eyebrows, or at least it got people talking. I definitely have talked to some folks around the industry who want to understand, like, sort of, okay, but what are they leaving out? What kind of accounting trick are they taking here? You seem to be saying full stop. We were profitable on an EBITDA basis and had positive cash flow, which is impressive. Like, because I remember reporting a story a couple of years ago, I think, where you guys were spending half of all of your gross revenue on local operations, and you guys wanted to get that was one of your biggest costs, local ops. How did you get that down? How big of a percentage of your revenue is that now? Because I know that was something you in particular were pretty focused on.
Yeah, I'll say, you're absolutely right. I'm taking full stop, all the costs accounted for. We were profitable in Q3. And I think that, and I know it's not just us, I love the fact that this is an industry event, and we have so many friends from around micromobility who are all working towards profitability, because I think everyone shares this goal that we got to be around for the long run. The world needs micromobility, and we can't be here if we're not profitable over the long haul. But a couple of things that we focus on. One is hardware. I think when we started in this business, the average scooter lasted a month. because people are taking consumer hardware and trying to put it into a commercial arena, and it was breaking. That can't be. You can't make money in scooters if you have to buy your whole fleet every month. And so a big part of it is investing in the R&D of our hardware. Every generation of Lime's hardware, and we develop R&D and produce our hardware from the ground up, which I think is still relatively rare in the industry. And every single hardware, we're raising the bar, looking at where it breaks, looking at how we make it more durable and longer lasting. That's been a huge breakthrough. The second one, to your point, is local operations. The people who help us fix, help us move, help us charge, help us win licenses on the local level. The two things are actually intertwined, because a scooter that breaks less actually needs less mechanics. A scooter that is able to not drain batteries as much, have less charging needs. But it also means that we got to rethink our entire operations. We introduce new technology to ensure that we understand what is happening in every single step. How much time does it take to do task A versus task B? And we revamped the entire in-warehouse operations. We also made a big focus around our HQ costs. How do we ensure that we continue to grow our top line faster than we grow our headquarters? So those are all things that we did to improve efficiency. But also say the world has come back in some ways. And if you look at the way transportation has evolved, micromobility is still down, but it's down a lot less than other forms of transportation, because people are looking for a safe way to move, and they're choosing micromobility over other modes of transportation. The final piece of this is that we're global. We're on 100 cities, 30 countries, 5 continents, which means that we're geographically diversified. And that's allowed us to weather COVID as it comes in and out better than other companies, perhaps. So I think those combinations, real focus on costs, a continued effort to win back riders from other modes of transportation, and that geographic diversity allowed us to deliver that profitable quarter.
I just want to dig in on the hardware a little bit more there, and sort of the age of that hardware, because there was a time when we sort of read a lot about sort of new versions of scooters that companies were putting out there. That was going to be the panacea. Hardware was going to be the panacea for scooter profits. And I'm curious about progress on that. Like, what percentage of your fleet right now is less than a year old?
I'll be honest, I don't know that number top of my head, but I'll let me talk about kind of the hardware evolution. It is, it's definitely taken some time to get it right. This kind of personal to commercial. But if you look at our hardware introduction, every hardware that we've introduced has dramatically lengthened the time it lasts and how much additional investments in spare parts and mechanics we need to put in. Our latest version that we launched a couple of months back, our Generation 4 swappable battery, it is truly the industry-leading hardware. And the great thing about the Generation 4 is that our swappable battery is interchangeable with our Generation 6 e-bikes, which means that for every battery, which is the most expensive part, and the part that when you throw out the scooter is typically still working, we can now save that and move it around. That is about a quarter of the cost of each hardware that we are now lengthening the time of that hardware. We're also investing in things like ensuring that we know every step of the way what each mechanic is doing. When a scooter fails or e-bike fails, who was the last person who touched that? What did they do? And then we're feeding that back into R&D on the hardware side. So if you take a look at our latest Gen 4, which is in Paris, and we're going to be scaling it very, very quickly, that hardware breaks less, lasts longer, and takes a far smaller percentage as a percent of revenue in terms of depreciation because of all the improvements we made.
Interesting. So you guys have, are, I think, maybe the only company that sort of right now is sort of full stop going after a truly global rides-oriented rental business. Your kind of best known competitor in Bird, as I reported today, also still growing, still they're raising convertible debt right now. But most of their revenue is coming from a new business model that they've been playing around with, where they're actually franchising scooter fleets, mostly their older models, to local on the ground entrepreneurs. And at least insiders there say that they're having some good progress with that in terms of being able to reduce their expenses, but keep up at least some semblance of growth. Have you guys looked into doing something like that? Should we expect a Lime franchise this year?
I think I of course I don't know all the details of the Bird franchise. I mean, a lot of what I know is actually reading your articles, Cory. So you've done great reporting on that. Let me say this: I love the model that we have, and the model that we have is a model where Lime manages, operates, develops, and ultimately is responsible for our own operations. When we go to a city, they know who to hold accountable. They know who to say when something breaks, who to call. I love the fact that we fix and maintain every one of our own scooters and e-bikes and mopeds. I love the fact that we invest in our own R&D to make hardware that we believe in, and we know what it can do, and we know when it breaks, how to improve it. That's what I love about our business model. It's about accountability. We believe it creates the safest model, and ultimately it holds Lime to a higher standard. I think that the one thing you've been pointing out in your articles around this question of like, is the kind of debt moving over to the mom and pops, this feel like a legitimate question that I think folks in the media is raising. And what I do trust is that I know there's a lot of really smart, good people at Bird, and that they will figure out a model that ultimately works for them and work for their mom and pops. But from our side, we love our model and we don't intend to change it.
Okay, that's interesting. What other, I guess, business models in the space are you watching closely? I mean, there is a huge question of, is direct-to-consumer and sort of micromobility sales, e-bike sales, scooter sales, is that going to take a chunk out of the shared business? And should the shared business really be kind of like a top of funnel for a kind of direct channel into Target or whatever? Bird has also done that. I think some other companies are fishing around in that area. But there seems to still be a lot of energy into figuring out like what are the different business models that work. Subscription is obviously another one you guys have sort of toyed around with. Do any of these have legs? Is there anything that you're watching closely to see if this is going to sort of actually be a big business line down the road?
Yeah, I think you brought up a couple of really interesting stuff. I think on the subscription side, we have a product called Line Pass, and a Line Pass, you pay a little bit upfront, and on every single ride, it's cheaper. We think it is an incredible product that a lot of our riders really respond to, because if you do ride consistently, what you want to make sure is that you're being rewarded for that consistency. And one of the things that matters if you buy into a pass, of course, is reliability. And this is also why we are investing so much to build that second and third mode, because if you buy a pass and you can't ever use it, that's when a rider churns from that pass. So we think there's a lot of legs on subscription. And if you look at a lot of the products that people interact with, it has moved to a subscription. People don't want to constantly think about how much do I have to pay each time. They want a predictable price outcome. And you see this certainly with Amazon Prime. You see it with the way people are consuming media. I think there's a lot of legs there, and we believe in it. And we are seeing great results from that. I think on so the other couple of things you brought up around shared versus ownership, we really see our mission as building the world's greatest transportation system that is shared, electric, and carbon free. And the reason why I think shared is core to our goals and mission is that we cannot solve the problem with transportation unless we reduce the amount of consumption there is in transportation. There are 1.4 billion cars in the world. The average car is utilized less than 4% of the time. The most common behavior that a car has is parked. And they're parked all around our cities. They're parked all across the world, and they're taking up space, and they're creating congestion, and they're taking up our streetways. One of the things that we got to do is make sure that there is a reduction in the consumption. Being green and putting climate at the heart of everything we do is so important at Lime. And so reduction and shared is core to that. That said, there are people, we think a minority of the people, who really do use scooters for most of their transportation system. And for those use cases, a direct-to-consumer could work. And of course, we should look at that and look at how might we provide a product that makes sense for them. But the bulk and the heart of what we do is a shared system, and it's core to the mission of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I guess I wonder, sort of if you become a power user, why you wouldn't just buy your own vehicle. I mean, do you have a quick answer to that?
I think there are many power users who should buy a vehicle, and we support that. And I think there are great options on e-bikes and e-scooters. That's wonderful. But I think it goes back to the first point I make is that there are different use cases for people. And one of the challenges with personal ownership is that if you have to buy something, typically what people buy is they buy the thing that covers all the use cases. This is how we end up with a system that is dominated by cars, and dominated by cars with 5 seats, when the most common passenger count in the car is 1 person. The reason why you buy a car with 5 seats is because you're looking at all the instances of what you can actually do, and you're saying, I'm gonna buy to the extreme. I don't think that's a good outcome. I think one of the biggest problems with personal transportation is that we have too many personal ownership of cars. And so the future that we have to imagine, I think, should lead with being shared, and should think about the mode that actually meets your need. There are times when you need a 5,000-pound tank to move a 200-pound person. Maybe you have your whole family with you, but most of the time a car is an overkill. And until we solve the size of the car, we can't solve this transportation catastrophe that is contributing to the global crisis. And so, yes, absolutely. Some people use scooters for everything. Most people can't use the scooter for everything. And if you can't use a scooter for everything, what you should be using is the right mode that meets your needs, so that we can reduce everyone's carbon footprint. And the best way to do that is through shared. So I see that as a minority, and I see the heart of our mission is to provide all sorts of modes so that we can meet your need without you ever having to buy something.
I want to go to because we're running down the clock, I want to do a quick little burst of rapid fire questions where I'm going to ask you, Wayne, to actually choose something to answer, a selection of answers to, and I'm not going to give you time to actually explain much. You can have like 20 seconds.
Okay.
Where would you rather Lime operate, given the choice of only one, London or New York?
I don't think that's a fair question. I would love to see Lime everywhere, because I think what Lime offers is something that every city can benefit.
All right, you're not pick. You didn't pick. Okay, that's you lost.
I didn't pick because I can't imagine doing that pick. That doesn't make sense to me.
It's a game. You have to pick. You have to pick. Yeah.
No, I don't think there's a pick. I think every city in this world can benefit from micromobility. In fact, every city is a need and an obligation to change their transportation ecosystem. And certainly that's true across the United States and Europe. And we want to be part of that journey as cities transform their transportation future.
Who would you most want to have dinner with, the CEO of Tier or the CEO of Gogoro?
Oh, that's a good question. I've had dinner with Lawrence, and I think Lawrence is wonderful. So I'm going to pick CEO Gogoro because I don't know the CEO Gogoro. I've actually had dinner with Lawrence a couple times, and he's so smart and such a great energy. And I love what Tier is doing in Europe. But I haven't met the CEO Gogoro. I'd love to meet him.
What would you want
actually apologize for that.
What would you want to ask? What would you want to ask?
My family's from Taiwan, and my parents actually still live in Taiwan. And one of the things that's most amazing to me is that if you actually look at the development of shared transportation in Taiwan, it is one of the places that's developed it the longest. And there's Gogoro, there's Wemo, and they not only do great shared moped, they also have an incredible distributed battery charging system where they're leveraging riders to charge. Just a lot of stuff where you're like, wow, this island that is quite small actually is really leading away on a lot of that thinking. I love to probe the CEO of Gogoro on what are they thinking is going, what are they seeing? A country that's developed this for 5-6 years is going to see things differently than what we see, and I'd love to learn from them.
What change would you make to a city if you were mayor of San Francisco? How would you change San Francisco? Briefly.
Protected bike infrastructure. One of the things that annoys me the most is when we are so blinded to the cars. We assume that a car has a right to our streets, has a right to parking. And when you look at the way a lot of bike infrastructure is built, it is literally a bike painted in the middle of a street. And that is not safe. And a big part of the highest correlation you see is when you have great infrastructure, people come and they use it. But when people don't feel safe on the road because they're literally sharing a road with a truck and that truck can run them over, they don't adopt micromobility. Painting a bike in the middle of a busy street is not good enough. And then that also comes with parking. I get lots of tags on Twitter being like, can you believe this Lime scooter is parked in the middle of the street? And they're so angry. And behind that picture is 1,000 cars litter across every single street all around the world, and we don't even see it. How might we reimagine our streets and share that streets more equitably and allow people to move around safely was the number one thing I would change about cities.
What's the one thing you learned from Dara Khosrowshahi? You were his chief of staff for, I think, about a year. What do you take with you to Lime?
So I love Dara. I had the incredible fortune to work with Dara. I didn't know Dara before he asked me to be his chief of staff. And I think the thing that I learned the most from Dara is that, you got to win, but winning isn't everything. You got to win in the right way. And I think, I love my experience at Uber, but there's ups and downs in that experience. And I think one of the hard lessons you learn is that, yes, winning teams matter, but doing it right also matters. And when I watch Dara, that's what I see. Somebody who is playing to win, but winning in the right way every single time.
Do you think Lime will be an independent company in a year?
I think Lime, so when I think about when we plan for the future of Lime, every single step of the way, we're planning for an independent Lime. A Lime whose vision is going to be a standalone business and a great business on its own. And so when we're talking about this vision of a hardware that serves every trip under 5 miles, when we talk about the investments into that third mode, that fourth mode, that fifth mode, every step of the way, we are planning for an independent Lime that competes and that wins and that thrives.
All right. How would you rather maintain an independent Lime, a SPAC or an IPO?
I think that there's so much speculation on funding and this, that. It really isn't what I wake up and think about. I wake up and think about how do we get to where we need to get to? And how do we build a transportation platform that is a car alternatives? And funding is in the context of that question, which is, you need capital to achieve some of these goals. You need capital to expand. And so when I think about what is the right thing for Lime in terms of any of these funding options or none of these funding options, the question starts with how do we build that great business we're imagining? What are the gaps between here and there? And then we're going to find the funding partner that makes sense for Lime. And so it depends on where we are. And, and I certainly think we should look at all of them very closely as we think about the next year.
All right. I think this is my last question, so I'll try to make it good. Mopeds, which you guys announced today, how many mopeds is Lime going to have on the streets in the world by October? How many would you, what's an estimate? I know you're not going to, you don't know for sure.
I don't know for sure. We'll have thousands on the ground in the coming months. I think by October, we're going to have, I certainly hope it's in the tens of thousands by October. But a lot will depend on how the pilot go. What do we learn from that experience?
All right. Oliver, are you here to kick us out?
Not to kick you out, but just to say, no, to thank you actually, both, because that was fantastic. That was such an interesting session. Wayne, pleasure to meet you. Cory, great to see you again.
Nice to meet you, Oliver.
Yeah. Look, that was a really fantastic discussion. I mean, it's always, I think the story of Lime is in many ways kind of the story of the industry. So it's great to get your perspective, Wayne, on how you think things are going in general. And I'm excited to try out the mopeds, by the way. We'll finally hopefully get some in some markets that we can come and operate at. Like I can go and trial them in.